it up again and we kick it off again. I know last week some of you mentioned that you're making or have made New Year's resolutions. Hopefully you're kind of continuing down that path, or if you haven't, hopefully you're not beating yourself up too much for having yet let another year get you down with not following through. But regardless of what it is, we're going to kind of do a bit of a restart as well. And it's a series that is called Beyond Christmas, Now What? And it's a series that is going to look at the reality that sometimes, maybe not for all of you, but for some of us, perhaps, Christmas is that great season in the year. Christmas is an event. It's a time where we come and we celebrate, the joy and the love and the peace and the hope of Jesus coming into this world, this very presence of God with us. But then, like all the other Christmas decorations, we just kind of package Christmas up and we just kind of put it away, and we then go on living life without the reality of God in the midst of everything with us. And so the question we're going to look at for the next 4 weeks, and I'm really excited about this, and I recognize you might not be as excited about it as me, but I'm hoping you're going to get there. We're going to build a little enthusiasm this morning. Yeah. All right. Way to nail the cue, folks. Awesome. We're going to build a little enthusiasm this morning. All right. There we go. Second time's a charm. Because I believe that this is a series for all of us. Whether you are coming for the first time, whether you're someone who has not yet made that commitment to faith and to God, this is a series that's going to help us unlock and understand the difference that God wants to make. Not just simply around the holidays, but in every day of our lives. And so this is a series we're going to be able to unpack this a little bit. For others, this is a series that's going to be helpful because maybe you've made that commitment. You've said, yes, I believe in God, and yes, I want God to be a part of my life, but you need to kind of dust off your faith a little bit, right? Because it hasn't been really put into practice a whole lot. And this is going to be a series for us to just get enthused again and say, okay, how can this become a part of my life? How can God become a part of my everyday being? And then for others, you may be at a place of saying, no, I'm living out my faith, but always understand that when we speak of a relationship with God, it's an ongoing process, right? We want to be continually growing, continually learning, continuing experiencing more of what God wants for us in the midst of all of life. Because this is a series for all of us, because regardless of where you are in life, in faith, in age, in circumstance, in situation, I believe, maybe not this morning, but perhaps this week, or at least this month, or at some time in our life, we all ask the question, what is the meaning of life? Why do we do what it is we do? And to push it a little bit further, to begin to ask the question, are the things that we are seeking, the time that we are spending, the way that we use our resources, bringing ultimate satisfaction? And so that's going to be the series for the next 4 weeks. We're going to kind of do a more general conversation here this morning, and then the next 3 weeks we're going to jump in and get real more specific, kind of put some practical handles on it. And then kind of help us out, we're going to turn to the Bible. And we're going to turn to a book that maybe you've read, maybe you're not as familiar with, and that's okay. It's the book of Ecclesiastes. And that in and of itself is a bit of a mouthful, and maybe you've never really jumped into Ecclesiastes, but it's perfectly positioned for a conversation around what is the meaning of life? What is it that we should be striving after? Because Ecclesiastes is written by King Solomon. Bit of a background, he's the third king of Israel. Now, he's often referred to as, in the Bible, as the wisest person to ever live. And so here's a guy who is incredibly smart, had things figured out. He was actually so wise that when other people had problems and challenges, they would go and seek him out for counsel. And so I think it's pretty good when we're asking the question of what is the meaning of life that we go to someone who's thought about this a little bit, who has something to say. The second thing is he's the king of Israel. And so he has great position and power. And so he's well respected, which also means that he's incredibly resourced. He's wealthy, he's rich, he has many, many resources at his disposal. But there's a fourth factor that positions him well to help us understand this question of where do we find meaning. And that is because historically, Ecclesiastes is understood to be written at the end of King Solomon's life, at a time when the nation of Israel was experiencing peace. Typically for kings, you'd be worried about two things. One is defending your borders, and the other would be expanding your borders. And at the time of Ecclesiastes, it's believed historically that neither one of those things was happening. And so why is that significant? Because Solomon had what I'm sure many of us wish we had more of: time. Time to think, time to ponder, time to try new things. And Ecclesiastes is actually the response that Solomon gives after he has used his power, he's used his wisdom, he's used his resources, and he's used his time to try many, many different things to see, where am I going to find that ultimate meaning in life? And so that's where we're going to turn. We're going to turn and we're going to see, here is a guy who's tried everything. And listen to what he has to say. I don't see anyone leaning on the front of their seats here, so we're not quite there yet. But Cliff is going to read it for us here this morning. And so just dial it in. Listen to what he has to say, this incredible message that's going to fire us all up here this morning and say, yes, yes, that is what I want. No pressure, Cliff, all yours.
I didn't know I was going to be an evangelist this morning. But Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1 to 2, 12 to 18, and chapter 2, verse 1 to 11. The words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem: meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I devoted myself to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under heaven. What a heavy burden God has laid on men. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is twisted cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I thought to myself, look, I have grown and increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly, but I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolish, and what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly, my mind still guiding me with wisdom. I wanted to see what was worthwhile for men to do under heaven during the few days of their lives. I undertook great projects. I built houses for myself and planted vineyards. I made gardens and parks and planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made reservoirs to water groves of flourishing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had other slaves who were born in my house. I also owned more herds and flocks than anyone in Jerusalem before me. I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. I acquired men and women singers and a harem as well, the delights of the heart of man. I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my work, and this was the reward for all my labor. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. The word of the Lord.
Who feels encouraged this morning? Right? It's like, So what does Solomon got to say? After everything he's done, after everything he has to say, after everything he's tried, this is a summary statement. Meaningless. Meaningless. Everything is meaningless. It's like, really? You couldn't even try, Solomon? There's not even a little bit of an encouraging word? Right? He goes on and on, and he almost baits us. He almost kind of taunts us, because not only in the midst of him saying that life is essentially meaningless, he's also laying out his credentials. He's almost saying to someone, listen, if you're going to disagree with me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. You think about wisdom. You think meaning is found in higher learning, in the number of degrees you get, in the number of titles you put behind your name. Well, guess what? Guess what? Basically, Solomon's saying, I'm smarter than you. I got this. You think you have titles? I was the king of Israel, the most powerful person in the land. That too, meaningless. Relationships? You think meaning's found in relationships? I tried all kinds of relationships, more than I probably should have. That too, meaningless. What about riches? What about wealth? What about just accumulating more and more stuff and things? He's like, listen, look at all the things I did. I planted gardens. I made vineyards. I built stuff. I had everything. I denied my heart nothing. Nothing. I thought of it. I wanted it. I got it. And at the end, he says, everything is meaningless. I mean, listen to these wonderful words in verse 11. He says, when I surveyed all my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Who wants lunch? Right? I mean, where is this going? What is it that he's trying to teach us here this morning? I mean, you can read this and you can kind of come at it two ways. One of these things is, how is this even in the Bible? Right? Like, most times we hear about a God of hope, a God of purpose, a God of certainty, and then does this like get slipped in somehow? Others might be thinking, wait a second here. I think I might like this guy a little bit. He might be on to something. Because what he's doing is he is essentially pushing us. He is essentially making a point in an incredibly extreme way that perhaps some of us, if not many of us, have experienced in our life. That sense of thinking that if we can have just that next thing, a good thing, then we will have that ultimate sense of meaning in life. The idea that if I can just accomplish that next position in my job, if I can just get the promotion, if I can just get the title, if I can just get the corner office, if I can just get, then my life will have meaning. And then you get it, and it's good, you're still missing something. So maybe you think, okay, well, if I can just have more stuff, if I can have a nicer home, if I can have a better car, if I can go on better vacations, then life is going to be good. But do you ever notice kind of the trend that many of us are either in or are going to be in? That we start out when we move out of our parents' homes, and we start out, I remember Rebecca and I, we were living in Ottawa, and we started in a one-bedroom apartment. And for the first month and a half, we didn't have any furniture. So if you came over, you sat on lawn chairs. And you eventually, we got couches and stuff. But what happens is people were like goldfish. You know, goldfish grow to the size of your bowl. So we just get more and more and more stuff. And we accumulate all this stuff. But then what happens is as we get older, what do? We get rid of all of our stuff. And Solomon's like, bingo, that's the point, meaningless. Why are you doing this? Right? You're like, okay, well, don't worry about it. I'm not about titles. I'm not about jobs. I'm not about stuff. I'm all about relationships. Okay, Solomon would say, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. I've tried every relationship out there. But if we think that, you know what, if I just find Mr. Right or Miss Right, or if I just find the right person in my life, then suddenly all satisfaction will come to me. Solomon's like, really? I think there's going to be something lacking. And we think, well, what about children? What about kids? You know, kids are such a joy, and if I have kids, and my kids will bring me joy and satisfaction. And Solomon's like, I don't think so, not all the time. I would probably agree. He even goes on later on and says, listen, generations come and generations go. It's like, you know, people come, people live, people die, and so it's like, what is he getting at? But there's this one phrase. We read it a couple times, 3 words that basically unlock everything that Solomon is trying to say to us. And the 3 words are this: under the sun. Under the sun. You'll notice every time Solomon goes off on one of his rants, whether it's a rant about position, whether it's a rant about money, whether it's a rant about relationships, and he goes, meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. There's always that phrase. It's said about 29 times, I believe, under the sun. And so what? What is Solomon doing? I don't think he's actually taunting. I don't think he's actually baiting. I don't think he's actually bragging. He's saying, come in, come in, come in, come in. Get a little closer, get a little closer. Listen to this, listen to this. If we attempt to find meaning in the things under the sun, ultimate meaning, in the things that we can simply see, you're going to be eventually disappointed. If life is only about being born, living, and then dying, and then that's it, then Solomon's like, it is meaningless. There is no point. That life becomes too random and even chaotic. And I mean, we see it, don't we, in our own lives? We see bad things happen to good people. And if life is just you live, you're born, you live, you die, then that is meaningless. What is the point? Or we even see, good things happen to bad people. And we think, how is this happening? And Solomon's like, that's my point. If all we have is what we see, if all we have is the temporal, he's like, I got some bad news for you. It ain't worth it. Yes, you'll have good moments. Yes, you'll have times of meaning. But ultimately, you won't find that ultimate sense of meaning and purpose in life if life ends when you die. And so Solomon, what do you have to offer? If you jump into chapter 3, verse 11, he says this. He says, but God has made everything beautiful in his time. For he has set eternity on our hearts. What Solomon is wanting to do is he's wanting to up the game. He's wanting to up the ante and say, will you be honest enough to take a reflection upon your life and recognize that if simply you seek meaning in the things of this world, that ultimately, you're going to be disappointed. And we just read a portion of it. If you read through the entire book of Ecclesiastes, you see how he drills down in this more and more and more, because he keeps coming back to this point of there's going to be this gnawing suspicion within us that there must be more. And what's amazing about what Solomon does is that he's using that card of finding a sense of meaning and not finding it in the things of this world actually as evidence for the fact that there must be something more. Have you ever considered for a moment that the fact that you're striving for a greater sense of meaning and you're not finding it even in the good things of this world, even in a great job, even in an amazing family, even in possessions and everything else, and you enjoy them and you appreciate them, but there's always this push to say there's got to be something more. Have you ever considered that's because God wired us that way, intentionally, so that ultimate meaning will not be found in the things he has created, in the good things he's given to us, but that they will be more of a pointer to find our ultimate meaning in him. I believe that is the ultimate point, not only of Ecclesiastes, not only of Solomon, but it is the point of the entire Bible. That you see over and over and over again. People are striving to find meaning. That yes, God is a part of their life, but he's not the ultimate part. And what we hear over and over again is that if God is not the ultimate purpose in your life, then something is going to be lacking. Because we jump to the very end of it in Ecclesiastes 12. Verses 13. This is his conclusion. If you want to bookend it, he starts with saying, listen, it's meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Now, he's being a little bit dramatic, obviously, but the point is still there. And in chapter 12, verse 13, he says, now that all has been heard, here is the conclusion of the matter. It's so simple, but it takes a lifetime to achieve. He says this: fear God and keep his commands, for this is the whole duty of people. Fear God, keep his commands. Now we hear that word fear, and we understand it biblically. It's not this sense of trembling, of be afraid, be very afraid. But rather it's a sense of awe. It's a sense of reverence. It's a sense of, for me, the best word that captures it is honor. And so what Solomon is saying is honor God and keep his commandments. What's interesting as you start to unpack this, it's not as if the teaching is the fact that then don't have family, then don't look for success, then don't enjoy possessions, because you keep reading, and there's actually times where Solomon says, yeah, you enjoy the things that you have. But what Solomon's point is don't make them the ultimate, and that too often is the trap that we fall into. That is the reality of why God came into this world at Christmas, to bring hope, to bring joy, to bring meaning. You see it later on in the teachings of Jesus over and over again. He meets people where they're at, and so often the people that fail to see their need for Jesus are the people who think that they can figure out meaning all on their own. Do you ever notice the consistent pattern that the people who kind of saw life blow up before them came running to Jesus because they realized that he had something that the world could not give? I just included a couple of extra passages in the bulletin where Jesus actually teaches on this, and maybe it's a chance for you to go and read them. Both are in Matthew, but it's a time where Jesus says, listen, come to me, find rest in me, find meaning in me. So that the good things of this world point us to the ultimate, and that is a relationship with God. That is a life lived out with God. And so what's our takeaway? The next 3 weeks, we're going to unpack this more specifically. Next week, we're going to look at work. The following week, we're going to look at possessions. And the last week, we're going to look at life. As we're going to look at, okay, what does this start to look like in my life? Now, when I refer to work, I'm not saying do you get paid or do you go to an office? I'm saying if you get up and out of bed in the morning, you are doing something. And so how do we do that something in a way that draws us closer to God and brings ultimate meaning in our life? You see, the amazing thing that when we start to put our focus upon God is that even if you're not enjoying your work, even if you're finding your work a slog, God is like, I can meet you in that place and I can bring you to a place of even greater meaning. And each week we're going to work that through. And so I'm going to ask you to consider 3 things this week. 3 things. The first one is take a shot at reading Ecclesiastes. Okay? But here's the premise. It's not a start-stop book. Okay? There's books in the Bible you can start and you can stop. You can start in Genesis, you can read a little bit, you can stop. You can start in the Gospels, you can read a little bit, you can stop. Literally, for the love of God, don't start and stop Ecclesiastes, because it might break you. Okay? It is meant to be read in its entirety, but here's the good news. You know the perspective that Solomon is giving, right? And so read it and look for the line, under the sun. Under the sun, because every time he says that, he's like, listen, ultimate meaning is not found in these things. There's going to be something greater, and it's immediately going to bring your attention back to God. And so take a shot at it. If you don't have a Bible here this morning, you can either download apps on your phone or on your tablets, or if you want, go old school, take one of ours. Right? Take one of the blue ones in the pew, or if you want a better look, take one at the welcome table. We have Bibles. We want to get them out of this place. Right? Because they're better in your hands. And so read through Ecclesiastes and begin to see, hey, listen, I can relate to some of this. And then we're going to unpack it kind of week by week. It's the first thing. Second thing, come back next week. Join us next week. All right, I'll know the success of this message based on if no one shows up. I'm like, all right, awesome. Doesn't matter, it's all meaningless, right? No, you come back. And if you can't be here in person, understand you can always track with us online. You can just jump onto our webpage, click on I want to watch Sunday's message, and you can follow along with us as well. Listen, it's always better to see your bright, shining faces in person. But if you can't be with us, you can still continue to follow along with us. Even better, bring someone else with you. Because maybe you know someone who's struggling, who's particularly struggling with work or with finding a sense of meaning in their life. Bring them. And the third thing is this. Will you consider doing what Solomon has suggested here today? Will you honor God and obey his commands? Because God has something in store for us that goes far beyond the days we live on this earth. It means that we honor God and keep his commands even when things don't go according to plan. You may say, but wait a second. What happens if my life starts to blow up? What happens if a relationship breaks, if I lose my job, if I get sick, if someone I love really is no longer with me? What do I do then? Honor God and obey his commands. Okay, but what if something senseless happens? What if something happens and I don't quite understand it? I don't quite get it. I have questions. I have concerns. What about then? Honor God and obey his commands. You see, when you start to learn the perspective and the understanding that God has something greater in store for us, we stick with him longer. We say that even though I may not understand, I am going to trust in you. I'm going to follow you. And what we see time and time again is not in our timing. Underline it, not in our timing, but in God's timing. Remember that? Solomon says God makes all things beautiful in his time. And so honoring God means you trust him in the process, in the midst of everything that is going on. And so this week, as I was preparing for this, just in conversations with my kids and in my own life, just taking time every morning, maybe get up and say, okay, how can I honor you this day? Right? It doesn't have to be in the monumental things. It can be oftentimes in the small things. And then at the end of the day, just simply ask yourself again, God, in what ways have I honored you today? And celebrate that. And also acknowledge there's going to be moments where you're like, okay, in what ways did I not honor you? And just own it and confess it. And then begin again. Because what Solomon is getting at is the message of Jesus. And that is, I want to live life with you. I don't want to simply be a part of your life. I want all of life to be filtered through me. Because then you'll have meaning in everything that you do. Because everything is directed towards him. This week, will you honor God? Will you obey his commands? Because in doing so, your attention will be lifted from the success, from the struggles, from the strivings of this world, to the reality of what God wants for you and for me. And that is the abundant life. Life that is lived forevermore. Let's just pray together. And so, Jesus, we thank you for today.